Charles, it's Sunday, and you're here with me, sort of. We're not walking around, but it is Sunday with Charles, and we're going to be talking today, Charles, about some devilish advocates. How are you there in New York?
Well, it's pretty cold here, and the crime is out of control, and it's
Yeah.
filthy, and businesses are leaving. And other than that,
How'd you like to play, Mrs. Lincoln?
it's fine. But no, the poster here is fantastic, and but the concept is really quite scary. I mean, I think what we've discovered in this long journey together, covering all these different topics, or one of the main themes we've discovered, is that investigative journalists typically need a peg. They have to go to editors with a story, and the normal story length is going to be, say, 1,000 to 1,200 words. If you're going to do a magazine piece, it might be 5,000 words. When you get to a book, it's, a good book is at least 50,000 words. So the burden you face if you're on the payroll of one of these failing corporate-owned institutions is you've got to convince overworked editors that they should allocate money and your time to pursuing these kinds of stories. So they want short and concise stories. They don't want to look at the whole frame. And I think this is by design. I think this is the way, in fact, other regulatory bodies are set up as well. The SEC, the IRS, and others. They don't want you to see the big picture. They want you to be preoccupied in internecine struggles that are not really going to change the status quo that much. The status quo being that the established political parties in this country are working together. They don't really want to achieve the progressive agenda or achieve the conservative agenda. They just want to stay in power so that they can send more pork to their families and to their political donors. And so we have, instead of actually trying to fix underlying structural problems which face this country and face other countries, what we've been engaged in is a charade. And it goes back longer than Joe Biden's life. It probably goes back, you always like to say it goes back to Kennedy or beforehand. And I think there's an element of truth to that. I mean, if we look, for example, in John F. Kennedy, technically speaking, the results for the 1960 election should have been contested, but
Whoops.
And John F. Kennedy, his family, let's just say, has questionable monetary origins. Got involved for a time bucking the establishment, and he discovered that didn't work. He didn't discover, his family discovered that didn't work too well. Gets followed up.
If I can interject, Charles, just quickly, I have a new opinion. I now believe this goes back at least to World War II, because I've been reading this book. Well, I just finished it, The Hidden Nazi, and also coupled with things that we're learning from Son of Sam. But we'll go into that on another time.
Sure. So we just bring it forward, though. I don't know enough about that period yet, but take Kennedy. Clearly he tried to buck the system. There are various schools of thought about, who's responsible for his demise, and then there's no question that Johnson was notoriously corrupt and boorish. And look how much damage he did to the system. I mean, his war on poverty was a disaster. The Vietnam War expansion was a disaster. You could argue that the war on poverty, prosecuted initially by Johnson and expanded over time, is in a major way responsible for the persistent poverty and structural deprivation in Democrat-controlled cities across this country. I mean, Republicans don't do much better, but our big cities under control by Democrats, New York City being a case in point, are stinking shitholes. And so here Johnson does a lot of damage. Nixon does damage, and they decide they need to get rid of him. So they then put an oaf in Gerald Ford in, followed by a peanut farmer who should have stayed to peanut farming, followed by an actor who I think initially did pretty well, but then his vice president, George H.W., flouted Congress and the Constitution with the Iran-Contra deal and perhaps other deals. And after that, you get the grievously compromised Clinton family who have wreaked havoc in Arkansas, in New York City and state, in America, around the world, particularly in Haiti and Africa, et cetera, only to be followed up by a simpleton, simpleton, failed comedian, George W. Bush, who
Was he trying to be a comedian?
Well, I mean, he thinks you remember he in college and Andover, he was a cheerleader. He was kind of like a funny man,
I agree, he's a
wise
joke.
guy. Right. I'm just saying, but look how much trouble he got us into. Not cleaning up the messes of the Clintons or the previous presidents. Yeah, that gets followed by somebody who wants to, quote, fundamentally transform America and transformed it from a leading rising power into virtually a failed state. Then Trump bucks the system, and the system throws everything that it has against him and more, giving us now this resident in the White House, not barely in the White House, who, we can joke about him, but we've been ahead of the curve on this. I think if we go back through our various stories, his decisions are not just simply, it's not a policy dispute. This man is a dangerous, I'm talking now about bite me, although Obama is also dangerous, or was dangerous, and is dangerous. But if we go back to your poster there, the art department's brilliant latest edition poster, these people, we've been saying it for some time. If it was fair, which it wasn't, to state in 2015 that Donald Trump was a Russian agent with no evidence, if that was fair, and if it was fair to do that with manufactured evidence, perhaps evidence manufactured by the FBI, maybe by the CIA and their associates, if it's okay to do that for 5 years, why is it not okay to examine tangible evidence, as Miranda Devine has done in her latest book, which I look forward to reading soon, and which I gather, Jason, you're reading? Why is it not incumbent, not simply okay, incumbent upon corporate-owned media to get to the bottom of just exactly how many major policy decisions were and are being made to the detriment of the United States for the benefit of China and her allies by the Biden family? It would seem to me that these are questions that, that Woodward and Bernstein, did Watergate, they're stuck on Trump. They just want to talk about the Trump family, Trump. This is far worse than anything Nixon did, right? I mean, this is just a decision when we think about Afghanistan. It's very far away from the United States, clearly. But Afghanistan is a place that has frustrated many colonial powers, the UK to start with, maybe others before that, certainly the former Soviet Union, then ourselves, to exit from Afghanistan in the way that Bite Me and his team have, arrogantly, corruptly, leaving a gigantic power vacuum to be filled by enemies and rivals of the United States of America, not to mention $85 billion left behind, not to mention wounded and fallen lives, not to mention, all these jihad squad idiots, AOC, whose new initials should be DUMB, but right, all these people talking about, Hillary Clinton were advocates of women. They are selling baby girls in Afghanistan now, young ones, 7 years old, 10 years old, 12 years old, because there's not enough money to buy the scarce amounts of food that are left behind in this nation that's hurtled over a cliff, thanks to the way we exited. And you get that preening moron, Jacob Sullivan, who, yes, he punched the lights out at Yale and as a Rhodes Scholar and elsewhere. And so he has all the medals of honor or dishonor that you can get from the corrupt academic establishment. The guy's a fucking moron. I mean, he got up there and as we were rushing out of Afghanistan to say, we have thought through every scenario. What, did you put a price schedule together for six-year-olds are worth this, 7-year-olds are worth that? Did you think about how many people are going to be killed who had worked for us before? Did you think about the way people around the world are watching this? And then as they think about making long-term commitments in projects of importance around the world with the United States, do they now wonder, well, today this team says this, but there's going to be an election in 2022 and 2024. Who knows what's going to happen in 2024? Like, we can't do any long-term arrangement in the United States. It's a crapshoot as to what we may do regarding long-term commitments. So the policy decisions on your first day in office to stop a pipeline, a key pipeline, and then very quickly thereafter to cease work on the wall, to create a gigantic refugee crisis in the middle of a pandemic. Then you have a supply chain catastrophe. And to think that you could just, because you got away with it in 19 and 20, pretending that you were actually running and pretending that the election was actually fair and audited properly, because you've conned the American people for so long. And frankly, you've conned the journalists, you supposed accredited journalists, the ones that Hillary Clinton doesn't think need gatekeepers. You've conned everybody for decades, so you think you can get away with more of it. And the only good news out of all this, Jason, I think, is that the American people, and frankly, people around the world, aren't buying this bullshit anymore. You see that in the opinion polls. You see that, frankly, in decisions. If this were really working for the con artists, they wouldn't be announcing plans to step down from safe seats in Congress, right, or the Senate. They wouldn't be doing that. And they are doing that. And if this were really working, this whole system of overpaying, in quotes, professors to serve our gullible students, the kind of academic swill that is being served across the, as Rush likes to call them, the campi of America, to tell rising parents that they need to spend, let's say, to get into a boarding school, which doesn't necessarily help you get into college, but it does give you an interesting circle of friends. You need to spend per child $300,000 to get one child after-tax dollars through a boarding school of 4 years.
Let me stop you there for a second. In Afghanistan, a child is worth what? How much is he selling her for? $100?
Less than that, probably.
And here in the United States, we're talking about $300,000 invested in a child. What
That's
a
just
gross
for 4 years.
disparity that is.
That's just for 4 years.
Right.
You got another 4 years of college. You then got, if you go to law school, another 3 years for that. Business school, another 2 for that.
Sorry, Charles, could you tip your camera back just a little bit? We're losing the top of your head.
Back?
Or just, yeah, there we go.
Like that?
Much better. Yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay.
So this is really not, in my mind, this isn't sour grapes. This is, where are, sunlight is supposed to be the best disinfectant. The mainstream media needs to understand that. And in that regard, just before we get to this, I think there's a bit of good news in that, in particular for you, Jason, but I think that CNN's peremptory decision on Saturday night to fire Chris Cuomo.
Yeah. You broke my heart, Fredo. I know it was you. They had to say that to him when they fired him, or it wouldn't be good.
But the thing about that's interesting is now 100% of the Cuomo family is unemployed.
Fired. Yeah, it's great. They now need to change the bridge. What is it, the Kosciuszko Bridge, or which is the one they named after Super Mario Cuomo?
Well, it was the Kosciuszko Bridge. I don't know what it was renamed, but
I think they renamed one of them the Mario Cuomo Bridge. It would be awesome to take that back.
Take it back, and then what I do is I take that. What's that landfill over there on Staten Island?
Yeah, the Fresh Kills. They could name that
Fresh Kills.
They got to do it like this. I know it was you, Fredo.
The Cuomo landfill, fittingly on Staten Island. But honestly, if you think back to what's happened in less than a year, Joe Biden has been resident for less than a year, for 11 months, not even really, going on 11 months almost by the 20th. And look at the damage he's done, and look at the change in the fortunes of the Cuomo family. During 2020, Andrew was being treated as if he were a rock superstar and likely to become president of the United States one day. And the two brothers were constantly on television together, yucking it up, joking, insulting their enemies. Now they're both out of work. One is under criminal prosecution, Andrew.
Mm-hmm.
The other, the rumor is that Fredo faces a sex harassment charge. That's what I just read.
But wait, Charles, if Fredo is helping him cover up criminal stuff, he's going to be charged criminally as well for aiding and abetting. And by the way, spoiler alert, Miranda Devine's book, there's a segment where Hunter Biden was going to invite or did invite Andrew Cuomo to some thing with the Chinese deal he was trying to make. Like they're friends.
Well, and we think about, I remember when Chicken Noodle News, as my youngest brother, was formed. It was when we were all down at Sao Paulo together for a wedding. And there was not in this hotel back in whatever year it was, 85 or something like that. There was nothing on television. It was Brazilian television. It was like 2 or 3 channels on CNN. And we had to wait 3 days before the festivities started. We went down there early to just get used to the time change and the different climate and all that kind of stuff. And it was an unsettled time in Brazil's history. So it wasn't like we were going to leave the compound, the hotel complex as much. So all we could do is watch the same bullshit on CNN over and over and, have the occasional meal. I just had no idea that CNN would grow to become what it has. At one point became, it was, in almost every waiting room around the airports around the world, the train stations. And there was a moment, I would say, decades ago when they took themselves seriously. But now it's all about the anchors and their own politics, and there's certainly not fair and balanced. And then we had the revelations during the Iraq war that CNN catered, adjusted its coverage of Iraq to cater to the employees that they had, to make sure to protect the employees that they had in Iraq. They didn't want Saddam Hussein to punish them, so they weren't really giving or even trying to tell the truth about what was going on there. And so this is, I would argue that CNN in particular is a massive social engineering experiment.
Absolutely.
That has failed miserably. And
you've seen this, right, Charles, where these guys are like on a set. This is like a Gilligan's Island episode posing as a CNN segment.
Gilligan's Island at least was funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think going back then to Miranda Devine's book, what she is examining is a tactic. And it's excellent work that she's done. It's a tactic employed by who's ever pulling the strings to find morons who are willing to settle for these roles and willing to understand that, the deal is you don't do any thinking. You just show up and, shake hands with people and pretend that you're the president, joke that Fauci's the real president, and your family will be taken care of. And you don't challenge us, and the tough decisions around the world, those are above your pay grade, and just shut up and let us continue to grift. This is but one episode in a long tail of grifting that certainly predates 1989, but I think the reason why I focus on 1989, that's when the world opened up. That's when, the Soviet Union teetered and fell. That's when China moved off a period when we were running dog, lackey, imperialist, capitalists, and all that stuff changed. So let's embrace capitalism or some form of it. And India went from socialism to, let's think about capitalism, state crony capitalism. And so the opportunities to make money, if you had money or access to money, multiplied dramatically after 1989. And had we been sensible, United States, with Europe and said, listen, we don't have a system that is up to the task of regulating multinational enterprises, whether they're for-profit or not for profit. There's not one central regulator. So that means that any of these entities can say that they can present their results to the world as being their consolidated worldwide results, but nobody's going to be able to check it. And nobody wants to check it. So that then gives us an opportunity to launder a tremendous amount of money. We can pretend that we're serious about regulation, but because people in our government, specifically the intelligence services need to have budgets greater than the oversight committees will give them. There's an interest in building up a gigantic pile of money to finance all these crazy schemes. Then, as technology got more and more powerful, instead of just eavesdropping on a telephone, suddenly with the new tools, the Googles, the Facebooks, whatever, Twitter, and Ring, and all these other inventions, you now have the ability, as if you're a corrupt person inside government, you have the ability to, in an instant, get 15 steps ahead of your competition or anybody who might try to do you in. So it's convenient to Bernie Sanders and the idiots who go out and still buy Earth shoes and drive used Saabs around Vermont, caring to what he has to say. The point isn't that a small number of people are rich. That has been the condition on this planet so long as there's been commerce. If you're born into a family with capital, chances are, if unless you succumb to drugs and idiocy, you're probably going to do better than somebody coming out of even Harvard Business School with $300,000 in debt, because you don't have to pay any interest. You've got capital. You can work hard and keep your nose clean. Chances are you'll end up richer than other people. That's just the way the system works. It's not always the case. There are many dissolute heirs who burn everything. I know many of them. I know a number of them, I should say, who in college or high school with me were phenomenally rich, and then they have got nothing. So it's not a one-way street for rich people. But when we look at that article that you had up there, the first one on, this is an article that one of our most active supporters, and thank you, I won't name the person, but sent it to me, and maybe to you, Jason. I got it this morning, and this is an article, I think the type is very small for me, but I think it's February 2015. Yeah. So this is actually, and perhaps coincidentally, just as I started getting interested in the Clinton Foundation, and this is the first time I've ever seen this article. But it's quite an interesting piece by, I think, an Indian person, and it goes into some considerable depth, assuming that the Clinton Foundation and other entities existed, and takes you through in a high-level way with some details why this whole approach towards philanthropy is a very dangerous approach. So, and it's interesting, talks here, but you've talked about this before. In 1915, you see this, the Rockefeller Foundation, which I forget when the income tax came in, but I think it's right around that time.
1933, I thought.
No, before then. It was in the teens. I'm not sure. We could check maybe, but I want to say it's either 13 or 18.
1861. The financial requirements of the Civil War prompted the first American income tax in 1861.
Yeah,
this is what this is.
You have to read the whole story. I'll tell you the story. Abraham Lincoln illegally imposed 1913. Well, so what happened was the original Constitution, our founders were very smart. They saw the way taxation could be ruinous, because they had an experience in England. They had many experiences in England, but one of them was when the king, I want to say it was James the First, imposed. He had various policies, and Elizabeth the First had various policies that had ruined the state of England's finances. So they needed to raise tax money, and they had this rule that you could raise what are called ship money from by saying, we need to build a fleet of ships. But the people who would pay that tax were the people who lived in the ports, because they would benefit from the shipping. And this king said, no, we're going to do a ship tax on people who don't live in the port, on the whole country. And that was one of the many reasons that people eventually rose up against the monarchy, and there was the Civil War. So I'm doing a very surface level treatment of it, but so the founders knew all about that, and they explicitly in the Constitution made sure that you could not impose an income tax. But Lincoln said, F that, I'm imposing an income tax, and that was struck down, I think, by the Supreme Court. And eventually they were able to get an income tax across the line by amending the Constitution. So that tax initially, and it was 1913, I guess, that tax set the maximum rate at a very low level. I mean, compared to now, I thought it might have been 5% or something, and it was on
But
incomes.
this is the baby step, incremental approach to doing anything. Get a foot in the door, and the next thing you know, they've moved in.
Right. And so, the income tax, particularly if there's no effective control of deficits, and if your country is the one that seems to be the most attractive out there because everyone else is drunk and falling down, then you find yourself in the place we are. That since 1981 or thereabouts, we've had maybe 1 year in which we've had across all government in the United States a surplus on the difference between government income and government spending. And in recent years, particularly, frankly, under Trump, but started really under Obama, the annual budget deficits are mammoth. The central banks pushed interest rates down, so it seems to the uninitiated that this money is free, or as Joe Biden likes to say, this spending $2 trillion doesn't cost you any money.
I don't understand how he comes up with that.
Because he's a fucking moron.
Yeah.
Excuse my language.
That part I understand.
So back then, though, on that piece on Rockefeller, 2 years after the income tax, it seems, now I don't know when the Rockefeller Foundation was established, but there are books about John D. Rockefeller, and some argue that there was so much negative press on the guy, and he was extremely aggressive. I mean, people try to pretend that the modern billionaires are like John D. Rockefeller. John D. Rockefeller was a monopolist who crushed his competition. Some
by
argue,
like sabotaging their businesses, right? Destroying their train cars and things like that.
Yeah, beating people.
He's like a mobster, basically.
All kinds of allegations. He saw a big opportunity.
Wait a minute, look at that. Same year as the tax. So he was tax exempt.
Well, so the way it works is, and I don't know what the income tax system was like in 1913, but the way it works, or should work, and this is a flaw, I think, in the structure. A foundation must be, in theory, in practice, it must be separate and apart from its creators. And so we haven't put the machinery in place to ensure that that's the case. By separate and apart, if a foundation wants to make a donation for the authorized purpose of the foundation that, let's say, Bill Gates doesn't want to do for whatever reason, he shouldn't be able to stop the foundation from doing that. Right? That's one example. If you give money to an entity, it must be an actual gift. It's like saying, you can't say, this year, Jason, your present for Hanukkah is going to be, I'm going to call the $1,000 pair of skis that I'm going to give to myself a gift to you. Right? I mean,
that's really thoughtful, Charles. Thank you. I always wanted you to have new skis.
Right. And similarly, the way this has worked is that people like a Bill Gates, who, whether you give him credit for it fairly or not, whether you think Microsoft is a good thing or not, the facts are the business started with a minuscule net worth, and today it has a publicly traded value in excess of $2 trillion. Much of that is not because of him. Some of it is because of him. And he retains some control over some percentage of Microsoft. So he's lucky. I mean, he's done phenomenally well from a financial standpoint. From a moral and personal standpoint, we can debate how well he's done. He's another monopolist like the Rockefellers. And one area where most Republicans, conservative Republicans and progressives and liberals and independents can all agree, monopolies are a bad thing. They never end well. Whether it's a monopoly that we give the government to come up with public education schemes that are really propaganda indoctrination, or whether it's a business. Monopolies do not serve the interests of society well. Competition does, or can, I should say. So when you allow a monopolist who, should consider changing his diet, When you and maybe hiring somebody to kind of dress him up.
He needs a bro or a man's ear.
Yeah, exactly. But when you give somebody like this the ability to direct the affairs with his then wife of a philanthropic organization, really with no effective supervision of him. He's the major donor. He brings in his chum, Warren Buffett. They are multi-billionaires. Nobody's going to stop Warren Buffett when he was there and Bill Gates from doing whatever the hell they want to do with what's ever inside the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. That to me is not, that shouldn't be allowed. I mean, especially when we consider that what this is, I would argue, is a drain on the tax revenues of many nations. I mean, the Gates Foundation, there's a story out that they've given tens of millions of dollars sprinkled over time to over 100 different news organizations. So how much of that money being donated has shaped or has stopped people from criticizing Bill Gates and his foundation? If we had had real corporate-owned investigators in investigative journalists, might Epstein have been called out sooner? Might Gates have been called out sooner? But
Charles,
this idea,
how can they give money to the news? I mean, this is
again, if you've got a con going in a monopoly, and it's let's say last year his net worth went up by $10 billion, or maybe more. 20 million is nothing, particularly if you're not even giving it away. You've already given, you give stock, appreciated stock in Microsoft and maybe other entities, you give it to your foundation, you get a tax deduction back from the government. So you get a check from the government for giving away something that you would never probably see it anyway or spend.
Let me read this to you from this article here, Charles. This is from the Seattle Times, and the analyst found that the Gates Foundation had spent nearly $70 million on direct grants to media organizations or for media training and research in an effort to boost and shape coverage of global health and development issues. However, the foundation told the Times that the BBC grant was different than the grants it had awarded to news organizations like ABC, which is a totally for-profit thing, and PBS. The grant, this is a quote here, "This grant does not support the news gathering capacity of the BBC," said the Gates Foundation spokesman Chris Williams in an email. "This grant is essentially public education. That's like me giving an alcoholic $1,000 and saying, hey, don't spend it all on booze."
Right, in front of a liquor store.
Right.
Yeah.
That's for education. That's for violin lessons.
Right. And so if we look, I mean, if we look at Bill Gates and there's schools of thought of, some say he's smart, some say he's an idiot, and a tool. I don't know. I mean, at some point, he certainly is in a business sense rapacious. He saw a profit opportunity, he took it, and he aggressively built and defended his position over decades. So there's something about him, animalistic about him. But if his mission back in whenever it was that he set up the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, he decided that he wanted one of its core focuses, one was, I think, libraries and education, but another, the number one focus was supposed to be global public health issues. And he hired, of all people, Rajat Gupta and McKinsey to basically help him think through a strategy. And Rajat Gupta was such a successful person on his own that he went to prison for insider trading. Why would Bill, if he's that smart, why didn't he see through Rajat Gupta's crap? I mean, if you look, there's this great book about McKinsey. I think it's called The Firm, and I don't have it in front of me, but it goes through the early years of McKinsey. It's by Duff McDonald, I think. DUFF, yeah. It goes through the long history of McKinsey, from its founding through its evolution, through the deeply troubled period under Rajat Gupta, where one of its largest clients of McKinsey was Enron. It made disastrous decisions, but in particular, when you follow Rajat Gupta, This is a guy who, judging the book, and I don't know if the book is true or not true, this is a guy who is really valuable because he's basically fundamentally wrong about everything. So you bring him in, you get him to study something, he recommends to do this, and you do the exact opposite, chances are you'll be fine. Unfortunately, that's not what happened under Rashad Gupta, according to that book. I mean, he went in, his team went in, and I know this, it's corroborated, I'm not going to say how, but his team was paid a lot of money by a major bank whose basically its business was banking. And his recommendation was to get out of banking. This is after you spent millions of dollars. You've been paid millions of dollars.
What a great idea.
You know, I think you should get out of the business you're in. Okay. You know, this followed a period where he was in Scandinavia, basically destroying his recommendations, or the McKinsey recommendations, destroyed virtually the entire economy of certain countries. I mean, anyway, so why would Bill Gates hire this idiot whenever he hired him? And anyway, so the article that that we had been talking about there is that the monopolists in the past, then later Henry Ford's company and Carnegie's company, and later in life, Gates Foundation, those are all examples of entities that actually gave assets that individuals typically owned and put them into these organizations. And as far as I can tell so far, and I haven't rigorously checked the Rockefeller, Ford, and Carnegie foundations because they were set up so long ago and the laws have changed over time, but these established ones with billions in them, they tend to actually exist. And all this reporting about the Clinton Foundation, you know, it's like you just don't want to talk about your Uncle Joe Biden who's into sniffing little girls and, you know, letting his kids run riot around the world, taking bribes from people who shouldn't be paying the Biden family any money. The biggest surprise for me, as somebody who has been around a lot of these legal structures, is that the Clinton Foundation to this day has not fixed its organizing documents. It had a chance when Bill Clinton was president, when they controlled the Justice Department, when they were facing the sham of an impeachment drama, which everybody understood Bill Clinton wasn't going to be impeached because multiple Republicans were doing exactly what Bill was doing, chasing interns around couches and lying about it. When Bill was there, this supposedly smart dude with the smartest woman in the world as his wife and first lady couldn't hire a decent set of lawyers to come up with articles of incorporation that did define an actual set of tax-exempt purposes for a public charity and an accompanying set of bylaws that actually they couldn't figure out how to do that right. And rather than fix it when they could have fixed it, they could have said, whoops, you know, they control the IRS. The IRS may not have prosecuted them. They could say, look, we just needed to make this amendment. They could have done that in 1997. And they certainly should have done it way before 2021. Instead of fixing these messes or trying to, they have created multiple additional fake charities. And because the mainstream corporate-owned media, quote, investigative journalists and others are I guess, not experienced enough to check the legal side of it, they accept the theory that this structure that houses people actually was built by a formal organization that had complied with the law, when that is absolutely not the case. This is a fake entity that has procured multiple bank accounts around the world, sourced billions of dollars around the world on false pretenses, has never filed an accurate financial statement, has never gotten an actual audit. And for some strange reason, John Durham and others who have, in theory, James Comey, Rod Rosenstein, Robert Mueller, people who have in the past pretended to investigate this thing, have not seen fit to protect the American taxpayer and go against the folks who've been using a fake charity to finance their lifestyles and their political aspirations, and to concoct all kinds of crooked schemes around the world in the guise of charity. Nobody has applied the existing letter of the law to this mess. And by operating in this way, what you do is you set others who might copy the Clinton Foundation up with a perfect precedent. Barack Obama can say, listen, I just got $100 million from Jeff Bezos. I'm set. I'm only 60 years old. Who knows how long I'm going to live?
I saw that.
And this is not okay, nor is it. I mean, if we wanted to recreate a monarchy where the president of the United States became king and carried that title for life, and the family would get special dispensation, we could do that. But I actually think, and as I think about it, I'm going to refuse to call anybody other than the sitting president of the United States Mr. or Mrs. President. There's only one president. That person was elected. Once you're out, you're a former president. You're just like George Washington. Go and tend to your plantation or your double wide trailer if it's the Clintons. I mean, and just stop this bullshit of thinking that you won a national election. And we'll get into it in a few minutes about how he may have won 2 national elections. Stop this idea that when you become president, you make a modest amount of money, but you get to grift for the rest of your life, and nobody's ever going to hold you to account. That's not right. That sends the wrong set of incentives out to people who, in many cases, could be a lot worse than the Clintons.
Charles, one minor detail, and I know this is probably not interesting to you at all, but this type of thing interests me greatly. Google Earth has updated. They've changed the IMAX movie. It used to be something about dinosaurs, and now it's washed ashore.
A good
a shark. And
Clinton
Foundation right there. Yeah.
Washed up.
Yeah.
But
anyway,
what's interesting is a number of people have sent me articles. We can talk about that one if you want, or we can. Yeah. No, Tom Fitton has a piece in the Daily Caller, which doesn't go quite far enough. I mean, Tom Fitton is the same person who sent a message to me saying that, I need to understand that in Washington, former presidents have certain privileges, and I'm saying, well, that may be where you live, but I live in New York City. F that. If you're going to operate a public charity as the president of the United States, there's an 33, and as an aspiring president of the United States, and as a who knows what Chelsea wants to be, you can't, on the one hand, say that Bill Clinton is this fantastic genius lawyer, young attorney general, young governor, young president, and then look at all the reports for the Clinton Foundation and discover that the articles are not proper, the bylaws are not proper, there's a missing 1997 tax form, none of the other filings are accurate, no audit is accurate, and he's out there still soliciting money. And that he and she were soliciting money for the Clinton Foundation before the damn thing was even registered in New York. It was only registered in New York on July 29th, 2009.
Didn't Judicial Watch also make a $33,000 grant to the American Conservative Union? He loves 33.
I'm not sure if it's the union or the foundation, but yeah, to one of them. And again, this idea that Republicans do this too, that Republicans through the American Conservative Union or maybe through the NRA, National Rifle Association, or other entities like that, that they engage in crooked fundraising through porous foundations to finance their campaigns so the Democrats can do it too. Bullshit. I think we've got to be close to a point where people of who are fair-minded people are tired. I'm very tired of getting multiple emails per day asking for various committees of the Republican Party addressed to me, and in the same email address, multiple emails from the stench of the Democratic world addressed to Charisse, which I think somebody's just trying to be funny, think that that's going to bother me, asking me for their causes. I mean, a pox on both of these parties. Yeah, that's a good one. What's the date of that one?
This is an opinion piece from August 24th, 2016. I have to say, the LA Times historically has been pretty even-handed in their reporting on the Clintons in that they've gone after them.
Well, that's because in LA, I think you have people who love Obama and loathe the Clintons. So,
No, even before Obama was on the scene, a lot of Larry Nichols' revelations came through the LA Times.
could be. But yeah, again, I'm sick and tired of having angry old scolds occupy a lot of airtime, telling me I got to jump, I got to do this, I got to do that, when there's no evidence supporting their argument. Supporting their argument.
Well, speaking of which,
yeah, speaking of this Russiagate thing again, when you interact with mainstream media as you have and as I have, and you try to get them interested in the story, they'll ask you, what's the news peg? Is any of this, is this inside information? Is this publicly available information? Have other people covered it? You go through all these drills, and eventually they write what they write. So where's the accounting at the New York Times, the supposed paper of record, and the Washington Compost and MSNBC and the ABC, CBS, NBC and the BBC and all these supposed news organizations around the world? You constantly, to this day, they get away with saying somebody is a conspiracy theorist. If you want a definition of conspiracy theory, you need to. Maybe you should do a biography of Hillary Clinton calling it conspiracy theorist, because that's basically what she has done her entire life. Gaslighting the world.
Author.
Yeah, conspiracist.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, she deflected on the Jennifer Flowers revelations by saying famously in a Today Show interview, my husband and I have been victims of a vast right-wing conspiracy. And with that, okay, you get away with anything. If you challenge, if you criticize them, you're a conspiracy theorist. You want a definition of a conspiracy theory that was sold as truth to the United States, look no farther than the Russia hoax, the Russian collusion delusion. Yeah, there's that.
Well, the funny thing, Charles, is she just basically said that, and it was accepted. I present evidence of conspiracies, and people say, "Oh, well, that's just a conspiracy theory." Okay,
right. But you see, the team that has been promoting this, and we think back to, again, 1989, when the United States had not yet tested our military capabilities as we did liberating Kuwait subsequently in 91. But the United States was positioned to do great things if it wanted to do great things in 1989 and forward. And instead of doing that, we have ceded ground, in particular to China. And a lot of the important structural ceding to China happened under Bill Clinton's presidency, when serious questions were raised, including by FBI people who investigated in theory. Louis Freeh, the then FBI director, in his book claims that he sent a memo to two people, to Janet Reno and Jamie Gorelick, demanding that they appoint a special, whatever it was then, prosecutor or counsel. And Janet Reno turned him down. So we've never had a real investigation, a serious investigation with subpoena power, looking back over the ground of saying, why was Charlie Tree and why were all these suspicious Indonesians and others routing cash to some governor of a small state in this country? And exactly how did Terry McAuliffe break fundraising records in 1994 and then others in 96 to get Bill reelected, in spite of all of the mounting troubles that really Bill and Hillary created for themselves as they moved with their dirty laundry out of Little Rock and into what used to be an impressive building, the White House. So there's never been a real serious investigation about that. And today, where are we? We've got the mainstream media is so preoccupied attacking Trump and deferring to China that they refuse to call this latest, as Biden calls it, Omicron.
Did he call it?
I believe it's Omicron. Crom, I think, and I think it's
Omicron.
Right, Omicron. He called it Omnicon or something like that. But anyway,
that's pretty funny.
Instead of calling it the G variant, which is what it should be called by the way that they
alphabet, right?
Called this. And we haven't had a serious investigation into the origins of this. People were ridiculed for suggesting that it might have been a bioweapon, as Navarro suggests and others think. We go back into the context of what Trump was doing. Trump ran on a platform to getting to rebalancing trade terms with China and other terms with China and getting fair trade. And he was having some success. And there were riots in Hong Kong. People valued their freedom in Hong Kong. Today, Hong Kong is a shadow of its former self. Trump is out of office. The Chinese are running riot around the world, threatening Taiwan and elsewhere, literally laughing at Biden. And we still don't understand what the hell we were doing in the Wuhan Institute of Virology, what Fauci was doing. We don't have an honest accounting for when this virus really started. When was the first case in the world? How many cases have there been? How lethal has it been? Are there any especially vulnerable people who fared worse than the general population? What have we learned about that? What was the regular flu season like in 2020? Do we have any data on that? How does all this compare 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years worth of history? Do we have any of that? No.
Cullen has that. No, Cullen's been going through that for months, and it just, you don't need to be an epidemiologist to see that the data, it doesn't make sense.
Well, the reason I say even Cullen doesn't have it is he's looking at data that's tabulated by other people, and that data may or may not be granted. I mean, we know that the moron in the World Health Organization, Tedros, is a diabolical person who should have nothing to do with any kind of government that affects this country. We should not be sending one penny to the World Health Organization based on what he did in Ethiopia. And based on the fact that the World Health Organization, near as I can tell, looking at the HIV and AIDS crisis, is a despicable institution that houses Unitaid, it houses the Global Fund, it houses many things in Switzerland. Money goes in, and like a roach motel, it doesn't go out to the donors.
It doesn't come out. Yeah.
Right? It just stays there and disappears mysteriously. And, where should we set up an organization that's going to give tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars away? Why don't we set it up in a banking capital where these, where we can make sure that it's just easier to have the banker right there, sending the money back to crooked politicians around the world. So I wonder if we want to jump to the story. We talked about whether Bill Clinton, whether Gates, and others were actually smart. And it's one thing to be smart, but I think you also have to be principled. You have to know the difference between right and wrong. You have to have a sense of when you're in a gray zone. And the more powerful you get, the more you should understand that if something is gray, you probably should run away.
What's that saying, Charles? I'd rather be lucky than smart. And these guys make their own luck.
Yeah. Well, if you want to talk about this is an example of an article. We've been talking about this, I think, ever since November 15th, when the first reports came out. The first thing I would say about this story is that it's worse than this. The peak of the combined Clinton Foundation declared revenues was, I think, over 350 million, not 250 million, and it wasn't in 2009. And here what you have to do is you have to consolidate Chai and make sure that you're doing all of the Clinton Foundation stuff. So some of our viewers have been with us for a long time, understand that when we speak of the Clinton Foundation, there are multiple satellite entities that operate maybe legitimately in various names, including Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton Foundation, Clinton Health Access Initiative until it spun off independently, Clinton Global Initiative until it was merged back in, William J. Clinton Foundation UK, Alliance for a Healthier Generation, then the special purpose ones, Bush, Clinton, Katrina, Clinton, Bush, Haiti. There's the satellite one that Bill created with Rajat Gupta, American India Foundation. There's the tsunami one, on and on and on. And similarly, there are subsidiaries in different states and around the world. And it's like anything else. If you have an idiot as the chief financial officer who's grateful to be the chief financial officer because otherwise he'd be begging outside of McDonald's trying to get a cup of coffee, that idiot is not, nor are the trustees, going to check too carefully to make sure that all the revenue that was sent towards the Clinton Foundation ended up in its bank accounts. And the second you don't have control over that, you have a prescription for disaster. You have a state in Arkansas that doesn't want to expose the endemic corruption that another FBI agent writes about in his book, that has been a problem in that state probably going back 100 years or more. So they don't want the apparatus to actually check any of this stuff. And I doubt they're really cooperating the way they should to expose this. I personally tried to get the Attorney General of Arkansas to look into this in August of 2015 and was basically told, never mind. We got other things to do.
Wow.
And so the problem here becomes that you can have people connected to the Clinton Foundation who are soliciting funds and then deciding to just keep it in their pockets. And those people could include the Clinton family themselves or hangers-on. Then you could have scam artists who actually have nothing to do with the Clinton Foundation, who create fake fundraising appeals around the world in the name of the Clinton Foundation, as I discovered back in 2015-16 when I saw an ad to contribute in a raffle for the honor of running on the beach with Bill Clinton in Gambia on January 1st, 2016. And I thought to myself, what in the hell is Bill Clinton going to be doing on a beach in Gambia? When I
did he
realized
have the heart attack?
It was a complete scam. It had nothing to do with the Clinton Foundation. So this is an area that needs to be policed. And instead of policing it, we get Doug Band here in this Vanity Fair. If looking through the vault file is any guide of how historically the FBI has worked, it appears that people in the FBI have a lot of time to read, and they read avidly news media. Vanity Fair is the kind of magazine that you put in your guest toilet area, along with Town and Country and other kind of stuff. It's not really serious.
When you run out of paper?
Not for that purpose. No, it's glossy paper. That wouldn't work too well. But
it's Doug. I mean, what's his name? Podesta, John Podesta.
I know, the Podfather.
And this is Doug Band right here.
Yeah, many years ago. So this is the same sort of format. Now, Doug, in this piece, he claimed in this piece, and I highly recommend that people read this piece. He claims that he left the Clinton world. He was happy to leave the Clinton world because it was, in essence, too corrupt. And he talks about the overlap between the activities of the foundation, how it also furthers, the way I read it, furthers the political ambitions of the Clinton family and fattens Chelsea Clinton's lifestyle and the Clinton lifestyle generally. And this is the kind of article which, if John Durham were serious, which I hope he is, he'd look at this and he'd then look at the stupidest memo ever written by somebody pretending to be a lawyer, the Clinton Inc. memo that we've talked about in the Podesta WikiLeaks files. And he'd have a serious chat with Doug Band and say, listen, you do understand here that you're describing your central role in creating one of the largest ongoing charity frauds in the world, and you're bragging about it. What's going on here, Doug? You're in serious trouble. You can either disavow this article and say that and the Band memo are bullshit, or if you really believe what's in this article, you are a co-conspirator in a massive money laundering charity fraud.
It says it right here, Charles. He set up Clinton's Harlem office, helped launch the Clinton Foundation, and created the Clinton Global Initiative.
Right.
And all of which is not legit.
Right. And because folks in New York State, for the moment, Letitia James is very interested in burying the Cuomo family because she wants to be governor. But why? I mean, another series of questions I have about the Democratic establishment in New York. I mean, New Yorkers can be pretty catty and pretty confident that people who live here are the best and brightest around the world. You think of that New Yorker magazine cover.
Where they're terrorists, you mean?
No, the one that has a map of the United States. It's an old one. And it's basically,
yes. New York is huge and everything else is behind it.
There isn't anything else. So I'm just amazed that all these wise guy bankers and lawyers have allowed the Clinton family to grift like hell from their base here in New York. I mean, why was Hillary Clinton selected to run for senator in New York State? What was her connection to this state? If she's such a smart lawyer and Bill's such a smart lawyer, why didn't they register and report properly the Clinton Foundation operations in New York State, which has very strict rules? And why did nobody in the Democratic Party who might have wanted to get the Senate seat that Hillary got, or to have the platform that Hillary took, why has nobody, well, I have no Democrats going after the Clintons. I mean, they are a disgrace to New York. They should be ridden out of this city and state on a rail. We think about, following a judicial process, of course, where they have a chance to defend themselves. And they should enjoy the presumption of innocence, as anybody indicted eventually enjoys the presumption of innocence. But they should. It's the government's duty.
But
it's the government's duty to prove to a standard their guilt. I just have done enough work to know that if the government were doing its job, they would be ridden out on a rail. They would be stripped of all our assets. They'd be paying massive fines. Chelsea would have to get an honest job. Her husband would have to get an honest job. And the notion that you take some brat, Chelsea Clinton, and just swan her into a public charity, not a private foundation like the Gates Foundation, make her vice chair of this thing, give her a suite of offices, let her fly private and first class, and have multiple hangers-on and chiefs of staff and all this kind of stuff indulge her various interests in a charity is preposterous. You want to do that with your own money? You want to, get a job and pay your taxes, which are big here in New York City, and out of what's left, you want to hire a chief of staff and a driver, and you want to fly private, by all means, go do it. But don't subsidize your lifestyle and your political ambitions and your general ambitions in a charity. It's just outrageous, especially one that hasn't reported properly ever. And on that subject, when these journalists gleefully today, even Tom Fitton talking about the Clinton Foundation on November 2nd, 2013, if you don't want to go back all the way to 97, on November 2nd, 2013, the Clinton Foundation illegally adopted bylaws that concentrated power to run the Clinton Foundation in the hands of Class A directors who at the time were exclusively Bill, Hillary, Chelsea Clinton. That you cannot do in a public charity. And John Durham should understand that that's one of the reasons why the Clintons were so eager to make sure that Donald Trump and his people never went back into this. Because that on its right there, you just start November 2nd, 2013, those bylaws are illegal. Not only because they say at board meetings, the Clintons are the ones who basically control this mess, but what they also say is that in between board meetings, the Class A directors control all the activities of the foundation, and any decisions they make between board meetings are not subject to review by anybody. That is so far away from being a charity. And they have never, they amended it in 15 to take Hillary's name off. But those are the bylaws that have been, maybe so she could run. No, she announced that she was running, I think, in April, and she was taken off in September of 2015. So any serious inquiry of the Clinton Foundation by any serious set of investigators that might exist would have discovered this in 2015, and it would have meant that she would have not even dared to run. But instead, the people who are happy to have these folks who do business with the crooked grifters around the world, they were happy to let her have a chance, and happier still that when she became Secretary of State. So let's go for a second down the path of, is Bill Clinton all that smart? There's an article that is not this one, and no.
Well, tell me what the subject is, and I'll find it.
It's the one about Bill Clinton and the law professor application.
Right. This?
It's a BuzzFeed article.
Yeah.
Now, here I am going to cite BuzzFeed. Like, I don't trust BuzzFeed at all, but this is a left-leaning site that I think is it gone bankrupt, or it's had major league challenges. But this is a story.
Got sued by some people, I think.
Yeah, that's right. This is a story, February 2nd, 2000. Is that 15 or 16?
15.
15. Okay, so this is as Hillary is fixing to run, a month before the Emailgate scandal surfaces. Here somebody files a story about Bill Clinton's personnel file. And let's spend a little time going through this thing. I have not checked. And here's actually what is this?
Wait a minute. This looks remarkably similar to that picture of Barack Obama giving a lecture.
Right. And so here we have Bill Clinton pictured as a guy in his 20s. He's not really a professor. You're not a tenured professor until you've been there a while. He was there a year or two. So he was a lecturer or whatever you would call him. If we go down the page,
probably.
Yeah. If you go down the page a little bit, you'll get to in this article, the whole thing is worth people reading and circulating. You go and you'll get, I think, first you get, I believe, the letter that he sent seeking the position. Yes,
here it is.
Cover letter. There you have it. April, was it 4th?
Yeah, 1972.
And it talks about the topics that he wants to pursue. You'll see one of them in, I think, the third paragraph, the end. It talks about white-collar crime or something. Corporate conduct. Yeah, corporate conduct can't be sanctioned or something like that. So, yeah, there you go. Corporate conduct, it's circled. It's for me very, very small. That is his signature. Looks very similar. And it talks here about he's very busy with the barristers union. And both he and Hillary were involved as law students trying to intervene in various campaigns, but also various legal matters, including the Black Panther trial. So if you go to the next page, I think is his resume. Yeah, there we go. All right. So 1964
real good at snorting coke, banging chicks.
Right. But look what it says here. It says School of Foreign Service, BS. That's appropriate for him. Yeah. Look what his concentrations at Oxford were in strategic studies, Soviet politics, and political theory, 1968, 1970. Now, just stop there for a second. Here's where we call a material omission. Okay.
What do you mean?
Why did Bill? It says he read for the degree. It doesn't say whether or not he got it. And you see, and this is Bill submitting this. And my view, if you were a Rhodes Scholar and you did not get a degree, our magaziner was a Rhodes Scholar and he didn't get a degree. They're very out of the, I don't know how many there were back in 68 and 69, the first, the year his class. But typically the people who win and take Rhodes Scholarships are serious people who do want their degree. You don't want to go over to England.
This brings us to the topic of, because people might be wondering why we chose this topic today, devilish advocates, because all of the people that we're talking about, people might not have realized this just seeing the title, but advocate is another word for an attorney. And all of these people we're talking about, Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, Barack Obama, they're all lawyers.
Michelle
and
Obama.
They're corrupt lawyers. Michelle Obama.
Right. Yeah, but I agree. But let's go back to the resume because there's much more to tell on that, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
that's not it.
No.
Sorry. Yeah.
We'll find it.
Yeah. Here it is.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So then, you see here, Yale Legislative Services Director, the Barristers Union. Okay, and basically a lot of political activities, right? Mm-hmm. Then does it talk about, going back up to Georgetown for a second, it talks about he's fourth in his class, I think.
Georgetown University School of Foreign Service.
Ranked fourth in class.
Phi Beta Kappa.
Okay. All right, twice class president. So if he was fourth in his class, the Rhodes Scholarship is typically was in theory supposed to go to scholar athletes, people who distinguish themselves on the playing field and in the classroom. Doesn't say anything about any. I think he was not involved in the playing field. He might have been involved chasing a lot of tail, but he was certainly not doing it on a sports team. So here's fourth in his class, which is impressive, but it's not number 1, 2, or 3. And Georgetown is a fine institution, but as a guess in that year, I mean, I wonder who was number one, who was number two, who was number three, and whether any of them ran. So why did he get a Rhodes Scholarship? Was it because he had the patronage of Winthrop Rockefeller and the Rockefeller family and the political SWAT back in Arkansas? Maybe. But I don't see in that track record, 64 to 68, I don't see somebody worthy of getting a Rhodes Scholarship. I don't see a scholar, and I mean, I don't see an athlete, and he's okay, number four. But this is typically it goes to the top person, number one, number two, at the many great schools across this country. So why did he get the Rhodes Scholarship? Why didn't he get a degree? And then we get to he's applying to be a law professor, as Obama says, and Cuomo also is a lawyer, by the way.
Yes.
What did his lawyers think of him? All right. I mean, his professors think of him at Yale Law School. Okay. Well, if we go down the page, we can find out, because here's some actual letters submitted by various people. This is again, I don't know. I can't tell you that these are valid, that we've actually checked this. This is a BuzzFeed article. Yeah, this is a BuzzFeed. All right. So he relied on an unstructured approach as a teacher, and he's in constant motion. Now, when I see somebody's in constant motion, that's somebody I want nothing to do with, because that's somebody who's trying to make sure the consequences of the motion never catch up to him.
Right.
I see somebody who's centered and says, sits in one place and says, "This is what we're going to do. Let's do it together. I'm not just going to rush out the door once we're done. And now let's evaluate what we've done." Somebody who's always in constant motion is trying to stay one step ahead of the law.
Right.
Right. So if we go down, this is an evaluation. I want to get to the letters of recommendation, and I would encourage
people. He left out
people.
the part about defecating from a tree at Oxford.
Did he do that?
He's alleged to have, like, some sort of Vietnam War protest. He went up into a tree and just stayed there and stank and defecated out of the tree, and
Nice.
total hippie nonsense.
But I think it talks somewhere in here about how Clinton made sure at Yale Law School to take a course on white collar crime, which I think, you got to bone up on that before you set up the Clinton Foundation. But let's see, to keep going down, Jason, if you, because there's some hilarious recommendation letters. It's a short thing on the bill. It's not additive. Okay, here we go. This is
Professor David Newbern. This
He's
letter
done
relates
very
to
good
William
work.
Clinton.
Let's see. Okay, so this is a positive letter, whoever this person is. Okay, let's go to the next letter. This is slowly down. This is Stephen Duke. We're going to talk about Stephen Duke in a second. What classes does he teach here? He says here he goes. He's taking a seminar this term in white collar crime, like doing it, not punishing. Okay, and we're gonna look into this Stephen Duke dude in a second.
I mean, you're joking about it, Charles, but this is an important part of what I'm getting at. The system of laws was created by lawyers, and the judges who preside over them started out as lawyers. And the lawyers who practice in front of those judges are working to create relationships so that they themselves can eventually become judges. And this whole system is presided over by lawyers who, as I gain more and more experience interacting with lawyers, there is a really alarming propensity for these lawyers to push or even break the law and just lie with impunity. And they don't really want to punish each other because they hide it behind this guise of not wanting to chill the lawyer's ability to jealously defend a client, even if it includes lying and all this kind of stuff.
Right. Well, so here you see it says, I have also worked with him in Barristers Union, an extracurricular program providing training and trial advocacy. Okay, we get to that in a second, just how well run that was. There's no doubt Bill Clinton is one of our brightest recent graduates. With a few years' experience, he could grace and pace any law faculty. It would, of course, be a good idea for Bill to try some cases. Right? So this is, to me, this is not a strong endorsement, and it really depends on who is this Stephen Duke dude? You know, how careful
Also,
is he in his life? We're going to get to that
about
in a
NYU. Yeah.
Yeah, but we go to the next one. The next one for me is a letter that I can't believe somebody. This is not this letter. It's the one after this one.
It's really good work that they got all these from 1973.
Okay, the first black professor at Yale Law School. Okay. Slowly at the top there. All right.
Yeah.
It is probably most apparent to you that Bill's academic record is not outstanding, at least in the context of applications which you receive for teaching positions. To me, that's like, okay, so I'm not getting the job. I mean, why would the guy put this? It's not outstanding.
This is the guy. He wrote the bio for David Kendall on the website.
Probably. Right.
Checkered career.
So right? His record is not that good, but the record doesn't reflect his ability. I mean, that's not the way life works. Right? So then let's go enough on these things. Let's go to the story there are two stories about Duke. Professor Stephen Duke.
Right. Where did we find those? What paper were those in?
One was The Current, I think.
I think I got it here. Yale. Oh, no.
No.
Oh, right. We had. Here's one.
Yeah. This is Professor Stephen Duke. Now, I would argue that any accused criminal deserves representation. I mean, there's absolutely the case that you should have an advocate, and you should fight as hard as you can for your client. Now, if somebody is on the face of it, if the facts suggest, and the guy admits, for example, that he's a despicable human being who has repeatedly done horrible things, injuring people, then you have the opportunity as a lawyer to turn that representation down. You don't have to represent him if you don't want to. So I'm not saying that, I'm saying the opposite. Every defendant deserves to be represented by somebody. But this fellow wasn't that much older than Bill Clinton. And if we look in the other one, the con thing, there was an episode.
Where was that other one?
Is this it? No. Nope. Nope.
This must be it. No?
Yeah.
What was the title of it again?
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
But this is the mob
Duke
boss.
scored let's see. Can I see the title of it at the top? Go up a little bit. No, yeah. There's another one. One more story that we had. You asked me. It was in the Current, I think. You see it there?
No, right. I remember this was. I
think it's up there on the top somewhere, but.
Yeah. Why am I not? This must be it. No. Might have accidentally closed it. This doesn't seem to be here. It was about. Oops, I got all that stuff on screen right now.
If you Google Stephen Duke and scandal, you'll get to it.
Right.
So bottom line, I'll fill in while you're finding it. So bottom line, when I went in May of 2019 to something representing my father up at Yale, where we were given an audience with the dean of Yale Law School, who got up and had all these genius move ideas she wanted to pursue, which basically involved liberating her students from the requirements of going to class so they could go and persecute Trump without checking to see whether any people in the audience might have been pro-Trump. I came away from that saying that not only would I not give a nickel to Yale, but if there were any way to get money back, that's what I'd be trying to do. And so there's this at Yale Law School in particular. There's long been this attitude that the number of kids trying for spots is vastly exceeds the number of places. I remember when I applied and did not get in, I was told that for the 160 roughly spots, there were 500 applications each year of people who had 4.0 grade point average and a perfect score on their LSATs.
And Chinese.
No. But the point is that there was such a slew of people with top of the top stuff that if you're outside that, if you're down at 3.5,
you're not even having a chance.
You don't have a prayer. And so with that, I said, okay, fine. But then you learn that Hunter Biden went there, and you learn that Bill Clinton went there, and you learn that Hillary
Clinton wrote the letter for Hunter Biden to get in there, according to Miranda Biden's book. Well, but that initial thing in the book is denied, even though Bill Clinton writes the letter. And then I forget who it was. Maybe it was the same dean. Some dean at Yale told Hunter Biden, just go to Georgetown and then apply as a transfer student next year, and then he got in. So I should go back and check who that was that told him that. If it was this guy Duke again, that's weird.
Well, I had a friend who's passed away recently in his 80s who was on the board of the governing body of Yale Law School and did not like the Clintons. And through that person, we were able to check and see what the story was. And he reported to me, I had no way of checking it, but Hillary Clinton did indeed take 4 years to get through Yale Law School, which takes 3. And so there's a story there, and that neither of the two were very good students. They were so busy in all these extracurricular activities, including working with this Stephen Duke guy, at least Bill Clinton was. And later, the system of supervising these students, which should have been supervised by Duke more carefully, was noticed by a scam artist who wormed his way in and said, started giving legal advice, claiming that he was part of the Yale Law School when he wasn't, and so he got scammed. So we could talk for a second about the Black Panther trial in 1970, when Bill certainly was just, I forget if Bill, by 1970, he may not have been there for the trial. Hillary, though, would have been. And, here a Yale panel is remembering fondly this experience.
Well, look what they're advertising, Charles.
Exactly.
Got a baby you want to kill?
But my understanding of what these people did, this is nothing to celebrate. I mean, the Black Lives Matter riots that we had across the country in 2020 are also nothing to celebrate. Specifically, the ones that occurred in the CHOP, where people were hurt, property was damaged, a man was raped by another man in front of his family. This is not something you need to do to accomplish noble political goals. People haven't thought carefully about an issue and are down a ruinous course. It would seem if your proposal makes sense, you should be able to explain it to somebody without raping your opponent in front of his wife, and you shouldn't be torturing people and killing people. And
it's terrorism.
Right. And to have all these people bask and remember fondly 45 years, a reunion of radicals gathered at Yale. Don't contact me ever again, Yale. I'm not getting a penny.
Yeah.
There's nothing good about this. Giving a forum for this, it's absurd. And Hillary and Bill, write fondly about their experiences at Yale Law School in this period. They celebrated these people.
These are not people. Communications secretary, Kathleen Cleaver.
Yeah, and she's a senior research scholar at Yale Law School, I'll bet.
Not good.
Not good at all.
They're recalling the Panther movement, the FBI, radicalism, and a time of great tension in New Haven.
Glad you brought that up.
That Black Lives Matter is just basically this Weather Underground Black Panthers thing reincarnated, and frankly, Charles, much more powerful now than it was previously.
Well, much better able to raise money over the internet in other ways, through leaky foundations. But back in this time frame, the Vietnam War period, the FBI was certainly involved in trying to infiltrate all these movements. So where are the FBI files on Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton from 1970?
Well, infiltrate or create them?
Or both, right? Trying to assess, is this a threat? Is it not a threat? Get people in on the inside. What files does the FBI have on these people dating back? Remember, Hillary, in quotes, distinguished herself at Wellesley, getting up on a day that should celebrate a 4-year experience, or 3 years if you rush to college, where people are learning new things, exercising their minds, etc. Parents are shelling out a lot of money. And she turned in her speech. She was required to have it approved in advance as a condition of giving it. And then she promptly, instead of giving that speech, got up and criticized a black man, a Republican, a senator representing Massachusetts. She just fried him in a speech that was supposed to be all about Wellesley and this and that.
Oh, she switched it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that gives you a sense of the way she thinks about it. She's the same person who, there was one document that was an important precedent in the whole impeachment drama, and her solution was not helpful to their cause. So I'll hide that book so nobody can find, and to give credit to Democrats, the Democratic leader of the staff said, no, you can't do that, and kicked her off the team. These are telling moments to me. I mean, this is a consistent pattern of lying, a consistent pattern of overstating your qualifications. And
Charles,
there's an echo chamber.
Have you seen this? Oprah Daily? Hillary Clinton's political career began with this 1969 graduation speech. At 21, she was already an impressive orator, more like an impressive crook.
Yeah. Yeah, I get up every morning and the first thing I read is the Oprah Daily.
It's got to be Oprah Winfrey, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna leave that one alone.
But does this talk about how she deceived the faculty and read an unapproved speech and manipulated everybody? I guess you can listen to it here. Wow.
Yeah, that's something I don't want to do. You got that, or you can listen to somebody run long fingernails down a chalkboard. You listen to, a 500-pound man throw out the contents of his stomach. I'm not sure which I'd want to do more. Anyway, there are a few other ones, Jason, that we had wanted to talk about. I don't know how we're doing on time.
We can still go. This was a good one.
Yeah. Back on, if you'll remember, Blagojevich, and it seems that Pritzker, the current governor of Illinois, doesn't yet have a problem with being a governor of Illinois. Is a risky position to take. And Blagojevich was a very colorful, to put it mildly, Democrat who has a lot of dirty laundry he could share. And for some reason, I'm amazed that, for example, John Durham hasn't sat down with him, because one of the speed bumps along the road for Barack Obama was an investigation into Blagojevich, into how people who were Blagojevich was supposedly trying to sell his Senate seat, or sell his right to appoint the senator to replace Obama. One of the people who might have gotten that Senate seat or was vying for it may have been Valerie Jarrett. So if our FBI has a Chicago office, which I assume it does, and if any of them in there are honorable people, they must know, or somebody must have access to the file and have a sense of what it is that Blagojevich actually knew. What could he trade? And what is the real story of how Barack Obama's home and adjacent lot in Chicago, how were those purchased? Who fronted the money? And what other things might Blagojevich know about? And these are all issues that the FBI, in theory, was investigating after Barack Obama won the 2008 election, before he was inaugurated. So where are the files on all that? What leverage did people have over Barack Obama in the FBI? So if you're going to be thorough as John Durham, you'd want answers to these questions. Because again, what we're trying to figure out, what Durham should be trying to figure out, is not not simply the particularities of what the Clinton team and Obama team were doing, may have been doing, to propel Hillary's candidacy forward, and then to impede Trump's candidacy, and then once Trump won, to impede his presidency. It's not simply what they did, it's why were they doing all this? Why would so many people in the FBI, maybe in the CIA, certainly in the Democratic Party, and donors, why would they be so anti-Trump? It's not because he's an orange man.
It's not simply,
it's not simply that, or his Queen's accent, or his flamboyant lifestyle. They were doing this because they did not and do not want the truth to emerge concerning the way in which the political donor class buys and sells politicians and what they get in return for their donations. They just don't want that.
Can I take you through something very quickly here, Charles, that pertains to today's topic?
Sure.
So I don't know I remember when this happened, but I wasn't that dialed in. But just in scanning these news stories from, 10 or 15 years ago when this happened, so Blago claims he didn't pay attention to who donated. That sounds like perhaps he might be involved in a similar type of donation scheme where everybody gets involved and it's crooked, and if we decide we don't like you, we can prosecute you for that. And he's convicted of lying to the FBI. Another one of these convenient things that they can charge you with or not, depending on whether you're Andrew McCabe or whoever. And then the other thing is, he's now filing a lawsuit here up to today. This is August 2nd, 2021. He's filing a lawsuit seeking the right to run for office in Illinois again. So this reeks to me of a lawyer's scheme to keep somebody out of the playing field by, get him on a felony, stick him in jail, and now he's no longer a political opponent.
Right. Well, remember, he was rather flamboyant himself. I mean, he's not a man who's cautious with his words. Right.
I just think they like to get people involved. It's like, hey, you're in Washington now. Start a foundation. Take this donation to your campaign. Oh, whoops. You took an illegal donation. So now we have to. Oh, yeah. He's from the 33rd district, Charles.
There you go.
Pretty good, right?
So we had a few other stories there. What? Okay. So we had a few other stories we wanted to cover up at the top. I just want to make sure we get all of them done.
Yes. Blago.
We can do.
I don't know. What else did we have there? Oh, yes. This one, of course.
Right. So Technofog, who appears to be a lawyer, is known to Katya Blanova, the person who does contributions for Sputnik that have involved you and me and others. But Technofog has a very interesting and long article that talks about the fact that Durham has emails that Fusion and Fusion GPS tried to hide. There's a legal process ongoing between Alpha Bank, which was accused by Fusion GPS of working in league with the Trump campaign and vehemently denied that. And I think the process of determining that the whole Russia collusion delusion was in fact a delusion is now it's only people like crazy Rachel Madcow and others are still on a track of saying, yeah, well, there actually was something there. Maybe Chris Cuomo believes there's something there. Adam, yeah. Is that how you pronounce his last name? But anyway,
Shifty.
I think there's no F in that. But anyway,
yeah.
There is a legal process ongoing where supposedly Fusion GPS had to provide a list of information, and they omitted certain information, which somehow...
The privilege log. So like when you're in a civil suit, you can say, we're not giving you this information because it's legal lawyer communications, attorney-client privilege, but you have to give a list with details of what it was, even though you're not disclosing the contents. And often people don't even want to do that.
Right. Well, but the point is that they got caught, and they somehow Durham managed to get this information. So the question is, how did Durham get this information? How did it come to the attention of the Alpha Bank people? And this just tells me that there's, I think, more to this. That Durham is probably doing more work than we assume he's doing. And frankly, the fact that there really are no leaks out of Durham is a very encouraging sign to me. He's probably got a tight team together who understands that leaks are forbidden, and he's just soldiering on.
Well, it tells us right here. It says the defendants failed to produce a privilege log or the communications themselves, but the plaintiffs learned about it because the lawyer, Sussman, was indicted, and that was unsealed. And I guess in investigating him, they found that stuff.
Right.
Oh, look, the privilege log lists 33 documents. I don't know, Charles. This whole thing reeks.
Yeah. Anyway, I think we have this development with Alpha. We have the Fitton piece on the Clinton Foundation, the other piece on the Clinton Foundation that we talked about, or did we talk about it? By the other Daily Caller person, Jason.
Which one are you talking about?
That's not it. That's not it. That's it. Yeah. Did we talk about this already? Yeah, we did.
I don't know.
Well, this is a very lengthy piece, and here what the Daily Caller has done is they've reached out to experts in the field to ask, what's really going on here. The spokesperson for the Clinton Foundation, I think Kevin Thurm is the acting CEO, a Rhodes Scholar, I might add, tried to blame the steep drop off in donations in 2020 on the pandemic. And both Fitton and others say, now, wait a minute, charitable giving in general was up 2020 over 2019. And beyond that, for left-leaning causes, it was, in some cases, up sharply. So that doesn't make any sense. And the notion that we couldn't convene as many meetings. Here, I would encourage people to send this and try to, if we can reach Anna, whatever that name is, and the Daily Caller person, they really need to go over our body of work, because they've written all these articles about the Clinton Foundation. They haven't bothered to check and see whether it actually exists. That's the bigger fraud. And the damn thing doesn't exist. So
this is an interesting person, an investigative researcher for Open Secrets DC.
Yeah, I'm going to contact that person. How many followers does she have? 50,000, 60,000?
Yeah. 50,000.8.
There you go. Not 33.
Not 33. And she has this cute dog who looks angry.
But so they've done some work looking at this. Fitton's done some work looking at this. The only people who don't like to look at the Clinton Foundation carefully are the IRS, the FBI, and their equivalents at state and foreign level. Mm-hmm. And again, people ask me, why do you keep talking about this? The reason I keep talking about it is I see the government deficits. I see the mounting debt. These debts have to be paid, and eventually taxes are going to have to be collected to pay them off. Well, one way to narrow the deficit, the annual deficit, and pay down the debt is to enforce existing charity laws against people like the Clintons and their donors who flout them. And the penalties that are on the books are very, very strict. I mean, you could, if you were forceful, you could go against the 3 Clinton family members and the people masquerading as trustees personally and say, you all have been involved in a gigantic deception, which has used the mail, it has used the electronic means, it has crossed state and national boundaries, and it has, by its own admission, raised billions of dollars. It may have raised, counting the Doug Band CGI operation, another $70 billion. And there's no accounting for all this money, and you never were a charity, and your donors shouldn't have gotten the deductions. And this is a RICO matter. You've got a lot of people stuck in the regulatory process here, and some of them are rhinos, and some of them are Clintonites, and some of them are Obamaites, so they're cooperating in building this gigantic operation because some of them benefit from all this. This has to stop. We want treble damages, interest and penalties, and we want jail time.
Yeah.
Even against former presidents. and former secretaries of state.
I think that would be the only sign, Charles, that things are coming back into balance, is if someone really, if the nation were shocked, Bill Clinton on trial, Hillary Clinton on trial, and a conviction of significance. Obama's. I hope it can happen. Even Hunter Biden would be good.
Hunter Biden would be good. And for what Miranda Devine talks about in her book, which I'll read carefully, but I've seen excerpts, I mean, it's just obvious, right? This Hunter guy is a fraud. He's a deeply troubled person. He's had a troubled life. But somehow people send him tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars and give him a chance to have a serious role in an investment fund with $1 billion into it. I mean, this is absurd. Nobody who understands the investment world would look at this and say, oh, yeah, this is fine. Yeah, sure. Crackhead, drug addict, serial cheater, undistinguished resume. Let's give him $1 billion to manage. Why not? It's especially coming from China, as Trump would say.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't know that the Trumps have a troubled child. I hope they don't. But I don't think whatever you want to say about is it 5, I guess, Trump children? None of them comes close to Hunter Biden.
No way. I mean,
if
what's the scale of crackheads, this guy's a train wreck.
Right. Exactly. I mean, if an accomplished person like Ivanka, how much shit did she get for having a brand, a fashion brand that had some relationships with China? I mean, she got a lot of grief over that.
Right. She closed the business, didn't she?
Yeah. And in contrast, New York Post tries to do a story on this before the election, and social media and whatever locked the New York Post down before the election. And
so
we don't believe there.
This is an article concerned. This is in September. So before the election, they're trying to smear her. It says Ivanka's business shut down 2 years ago. So how is it still bringing in money? I could probably answer that without even reading the article. If you have a fashion brand that's running for years and years and close it, it probably still has outstanding invoices, fulfilling things to companies, and it's going to take a little while to wind it down. Hunter Biden, in that book, she has his own emails and text messages to Russian hookers and Chinese oligarchs who are now permanently disappeared and complaining about not getting enough millions out of the company from Tony Bobolinsky. It's just completely out of control. And
it's a complete double standard. I mean, so the question is, how far? A question for the American people is, how far do we want to be pushed? I mean, do we want this now rubbed in our face that there's a protected class, and those are the Democrats, and people who pretend to be woke and progressive, and there's everybody else. And you play along and join that class, and you'll do well. You fight it, and you'll get Manaforted. You'll get Roger Stone. You'll get Jerry Corsi. Is that really what we want to have in this country? And I think the answer to that question is no. Now, on that subject, did you see the Roger Stone piece? And I think he was on with Tucker Carlson, talking about January 6th and how he thought it was a setup. He was asked, he and Alex Jones were asked supposedly, did they want the Secret Service to take them down in front of the Capitol? And it's a long piece where Stone is saying that he thinks that's very suspicious, that has never happened in the past, that they were trying to frame Stone and Jones and others. Did you see that?
You sent it to me, but I'm having a difficult time finding it right now. They obviously subpoenaed them. We heard that. This is the Rapid City Journal. That's not going to let me look at it without paying. Do you remember where you saw that, Charles?
I thought it was a Fox News story.
Then I just had it there. Yeah. He's blasting critics. Guilt by association. Is that it?
What is the date of that?
1 day ago.
Yeah, that's it.
So Republican political consultant and former Nixon and Trump campaign advisor Roger Stone tore into critics.
Yeah, he was on Tucker. There you go.
They believe he helped or had knowledge in the planning and financing of the rallies in D.C. and the violent attack on the U.S. Capitol. Well, he is closely associated with that guy, Ali Alexander, who is quite sketchy.
Right. Well, there's another story as well, John Eastman's story, about how his legal argument against complying with the January 6th committee, which I think is an interesting story as well. Again, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not familiar with the regulations that apply with how House committees and the House itself functions. But this article,
I like this argument quite a bit.
Yeah, it says that the committee itself was not constituted properly, that the minority leader did not have the rights did not have a chance to exercise the rights that the regulations say he must have, and further, that the subpoenas that have gone out are overly broad and exceed reasonable requests for reasonable amounts of information. We'll see. I'm obviously he's going to fight this. We'll see how high it goes into the court. The DC courts are probably not going to be too helpful to him. And the question is, what if it gets to the Supreme Court? What will the Supreme Court say?
In addition to not answering questions by invoking the Fifth Amendment, Eastman claimed on Bannon's podcast that the partisan makeup of the committee and the way it was organized makes it invalid. Well, this is basically CNN, whitewashing the facts of what he said, but from what we've read about this, it sounds to me like Eastman is engaging in counter lawfare, basically saying, look, you guys are just trying to create a committee that sells real well on CNN, the New York Times, the Washington Post, etc. But when we get into the letter of the law as far as how these things are supposed to be done, you don't have the proper basis to do this.
Yeah, I don't know that he's lawfaring. What he's saying
counter lawfaring.
Yeah. I just say it's proper legal reasoning or whatever. But I mean, what he's saying sounds correct.
Yes.
And when we hear, I think it was the leader of this select, was Schiff as the leader, or is there another person who's the leader of the January 6th? I think it's not Schiff, it's somebody else.
It's somebody else.
Who is quoted as saying that if you invoke the Fifth Amendment, that means by definition you're guilty.
Which is not supposed to do it.
That's an outrageous.
Thompson is the chair.
That's an outrageous, disqualifying comment.
I agree. Because that's saying using your constitutional rights means you're guilty.
Well, it's the exact opposite of what he said is true.
Correct. Here's the guy.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, this kind of a path, including some of the incendiary comments coming out of MSNBC and coming out of that Senator Jeanne Shaheen on the abortion issue, the abortion case. I mean, people need to calm down.
This guy needs a new website. It's a mess.
Yeah. Well, people need to calm down, and they need to understand that we are setting precedents here. At this moment, we have a resident who's Democrat. We have a Senate that is barely controlled by Democrats, and a House that is also barely controlled by Democrats. Things could change, and they change quickly. Actually, they're going to change in as soon as 12 months or thereabouts, with the November 2022 election, which does not look very good for Democrats. So, if you want to set this precedent where the party with a thin measure of control in the House and the Senate and the White House can exercise basically dictatorial rights, suppressing the input of the minority, that precedent could be set and then applied to Democrats in 2023. Is that what people want?
Charles, they've already rewritten the Constitution because if you recall, the thing that you've just pointed out is exactly the same thing that the prosecutor in the Kyle Rittenhouse trial tried to do. He brought up the fact that Kyle Rittenhouse invoked his Fifth Amendment rights by not speaking without a lawyer to the police or, not speaking at all. And this is your constitutional right to not incriminate yourself. And here we see government prosecutors and the head of a very important House committee denying these guys their constitutional rights.
Well, right. I mean, it's not really Republicans and Democrats. We have hysterians, who are power mad hysterians who understand that by yelling and screaming and carrying on and asserting there's a gigantic problem that only they can solve, that gives them political power and a path towards money. And, I'm sorry, what I witnessed personally in Columbus Circle rather, with you on tape at the BLM rally,
Chip,
was an actual insurrection. It was a candidate for the House stating that her goal was not to change America for the better, but to burn it down. Some words to that effect were used, to burn the system down. That's an insurrection. That is not what people on January 6th were talking about. And look at the coverage.
Minimal.
We were there.
I know, but unfortunately, all those YouTube channels have been kind of deleted and destroyed by various means. So I don't have ready access to that video. I will reload it. What is going on here? I think I'm out of memory on this computer. Might have too many web pages open. Well, Charles, we've covered a lot of excellent material today. I hope that people have been enjoying this episode of the show as much as I have. Very informative, and I think a very appropriate title, and frankly, one of the most important issues of our time. If the lawyers who are there to represent people and lawyers who become judges can't be trusted to uphold the law, but rather have a propensity to break the law, then there is no rule of law, and we are in serious trouble. So I'll be back in New York for our next show, and I think people will enjoy that. I want to thank you, Charles, for preparing all this great material today, and I want to thank everybody, particularly the viewer sponsors who make the show possible. People can sponsor Crowdsource the Truth by going to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. And I hope everybody has a great evening. I'll be back tomorrow. Thanks, Charles.
Thank you, Jason.